The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes has been surrounded in controversy because a lot of people are sick of prequel movies, and Rachel Zegler has brought nothing to this movie but scrutiny, and now we finally have the full weekend numbers, and it has done the lowest in the franchise. I have a few different things to show off, but before we get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, follow me on social media, and consider supporting through Patreon or via YouTube membership. Now, obviously, The Hunger Games is a very notable name at this point, so the creatives behind this project were really hoping it was going to blow away the other movies and it was going to do fantastic because there have been a lot of people who have been itching for more Hunger Games content, and when Suzanne Collins released this book in 2020, they basically announced that it was going to be made into a film only a few months later. And so while yes, we are getting a deeper look into the backstory of some of the prominent characters during Katniss's games and times, unfortunately for them, this movie hasn't quite stuck the landing they expected because it now has the worst opening numbers of the entire franchise. So I figured we would go oldest to newest, starting with Hunger Games in 2012, the movie that started it all, lower budget, but definitely captured the essence of what the Hunger Games books were about. It had a domestic opening of nearly $153 million, which was very good for the first movie, but it did not get worse from there. The Hunger Games Catching Fire, which I definitely agree was the best movie out of them all, had a domestic opening of $158 million. So while it wasn't some drastic difference, it still was definitely a bit higher. And then we start getting to Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2, where they started to decline. Part 1 had only a $121 million domestic opening, and then Part 2 had a $102 million domestic opening. So even if we compare it to the first Hunger Games film in 2012, these are still, big numbers, right? $100 million is nothing to scoff at. It is a hefty chunk of change. I mean, these movies, none of them individually went over $1 billion, but if you look at something like Catching Fire, it made $865 million worldwide. So the franchise in totality now has actually made over $2 billion, but now we have The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which opened to a measly $44 million domestically. And for weeks now, we've heard that this movie was supposed to do fantastic at the box office and it was going to be crazy. And obviously, it did take a lot of attention off of the Marvels, which now has had the worst MCU records for, second weekend drop. And also, it had one of the lowest openings. I mean, it has basically broken all of the wrong records. But Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes domestically only opened to $44 million, which is such a massive drop. That is $58 million less than even the previous lowest. So this movie is currently sitting at the worst in the franchise, just judging by these numbers. Now, of course, over time, it may slowly but surely tick up, but these are even under the lowest estimates that we've seen over the past few weeks. And of course, the media is trying to spin it as, well, it just had a subdued opening. No, it had a terrible opening. I mean, this movie has brought in, I'm sure, far less than they were initially expecting. Again, just judging by the best in the franchise, which was $152 million versus $44 million, that just shows most likely how this movie is going to struggle over the weeks. Of course, they don't make movies expecting it to be the worst money earner in the franchise. They don't make movies to do worse than the previously lowest installment. They do it to go above and beyond the numbers that they previously had. They want to break records. They want to, bring in as much money as possible. And this is the last Hunger Games movie that they can milk for years and years and years. Of course, they have only made movies surrounding the books, and like I mentioned, when they released this book, when Suzanne Collins released this book, they very quickly announced this movie adaptation, but she's not going to have another book most likely for years now, meaning the Hunger Games is over, at least for a couple of years, since she hasn't even released the next book she plans to. So this was really their last chance to milk the Hunger Games for a while, and unfortunately for them, it doesn't seem like it's going all that well. And I mean, even looking at scores, the user scores are actually pretty solid, an 84% all audience. I do think that judging by these lackluster domestic opening numbers, that means that really only Hunger Games fans went to see this, and it did not catch, or at least it has not caught yet with general audiences, but critics hated this. Now, of course, I do not trust critics. I would never judge if I want to see a movie or not based on what the critics are saying. Half the time they're shills, but they're definitely not enjoying it. The all is a 62, and the top is a measly 55%, so right here it shows that they are split right down the middle, 29 fresh, 24 rotten. And a lot of the talk I have seen on social media surrounding this film has not been positive. Now, I decided ultimately to not monetarily support this film because of Rachel Zegler. I did not want to support a movie that she was in. She has made very controversial statements over the past year and a half. She has completely disregarded what fans have said about her when it comes to Snow White, and they got kind of lucky because, of course, Songbirds and Snakes didn't have a lot of promotional material where she didn't go into interviews, because she most likely would have said something controversial. But at the same time, I'm sure that's what the media over the next few weeks is going to really blame it on, is, oh, you guys just have no idea how important promotional material is for films. And I would partially agree, but before the actor strikes were actually over, they got permission to do promotional material for this movie. They got permission for the actors and the actresses to go into interviews and, talk about this film. They got a special okay from SAG-AFTRA, so realistically, they still had all of the chances that an average movie would, even though the strikes did not technically end until 2 weeks before this release. So, they got that special permission, so that really isn't an acceptable excuse at this point. And it will be very interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks and its lifespan at the box office, because I don't think that this movie is going to do good. I mean, at this point, having a domestic opening of only 44 million, which again is 58 million less than the previous lowest, Mockingjay Part 2, definitely screams trouble in paradise. It does not show that they are, going to have smooth sailing going forward. Only time will tell. Maybe it will still, slowly but steadily creep up to reach decent numbers, but I do not see it getting anywhere close to Catching Fire, which was 865 million worldwide. They would be even lucky if they got to 661 million worldwide. Only time will tell, but I definitely think that this is a combination of all of the bad press Rachel Zegler has faced, and also the fact that they're not adapting another one of Katniss's stories, and a lot of people do not really like Lucy, who Zegler plays, and I just feel like, unfortunately for them, a lot of people are very sick and tired of prequels, especially a prequel like this where they try to play off the main villain in the quadrilogy as not necessarily a hero in this, but as a character you have to sympathize towards in order to even partially enjoy this movie. I don't see this film going anywhere good for them anytime soon. Only time will tell. I will be keeping my eyes on the released numbers, but right now it is looking very, very rough for the Hunger Games. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.